All right, guys, we're going to cover chapter 14. This is going to be writing reports and keeping records. All right. Um, so what's the biggest part about reports?
I've always went off that whole KISS thing, keeping it simple, but that's probably wrong.
Well, no, no, I like that. I really do. Um, the thing about it is to keep it simple. Now, what's important about reports is that if it's not wrote down, it didn't happen. So we need to make sure that we notate every little thing. I feel like it's really important. I know this is chapter 14, and in the book, it's kind of at the very end. But I think this is some of the first chapters to be taught because we really need to be mindful of the things that we need to be aware of our observations, and that we record these things. Because again, if we don't record them, if they're not wrote down, they didn't happen. Um, and it also helps you to keep track. If you're doing a lot of inspections, it all blends together. So you want to make sure that you keep very good records. Um, Now, on our field trip Wednesday, I'm going to have different examples of reports that are out there. Some are really simple, some are overly difficult, but it's kind of what works best for you and your agency. But talking about keeping it simple, I'm with that. I do in my job now. I do a lot of law enforcement reports that may go to court. Well, if I'm doing a narrative, I want my narrative to be where people can understand it. And I know that I'm smart, but I don't need to, fill it with a whole bunch of words that people's going to have to break out the dictionary to understand. Um, so I try not to be really wordy, and I try if I can use it in a simpler uh, text, then I do that. Um, if anybody's taken public information officer, you know that whenever you give a press release or you release some type of information, you're trying to write it at a fifth grade level so people can understand it. And it's not that you think everybody's dumb, but you want to be able to have people to understand it. But again, you want to be very descriptive on things, especially when it comes to observation wise. And excuse me, you may want to include very detailed and very specific parts of your observation because it may be the determining factor as to why you did this or recommend this other than that, so on and so forth. So, anyway, all right, our objectives. We'll know the common elements of effective documentation, discuss the barriers in written communication, talk about field note sketches and diagrams, photographs, um, all that, the elements of a fire inspection report, and how the documentation used in resolving complaints, how to properly reference a code or standard, um, the maintain our records maintenance laws and guidelines. There are certain laws out there on how long you have to retain these files, um, and how to comply with the Freedom of Information Act. That's kind of a fine line, especially now in the mix where you have HIPAA and you have freedom of information. There's most places have a certain policy or procedure that has to be followed before that information is released, and describe to how to present evidence during legal proceedings. All right, we know we have to document everything. All right, what we observed during the inspection. All right, now, not to say that you have to do a narrative or like a little written account that I arrived at 10:25 a.m. Central Standard Time to 123 4th Street to you don't have to do all that. There's some examples of fire inspection reports that is kind of like a check the box kind of thing, and they're made very simple so that it can be simply done and simply um, understood if somebody were to pick up that form and to be able to look through it. Um, I found if there's any type of discrepancies or you're dealing with um, an entity that's kind of a pain in the butt, and you want really good documentation and reference, it's best at that point to write a letter to that entity, whether it be a business or an association or a group or agency or whatever that you're doing the inspection at, so that everything's recorded properly and referenced properly. All right, so every inspection should have a written report. And I agree with that. In kind of the way that I work, kind of the exception is that if I do, like, say I do an inspection and they call for a final inspection for a commercial building, and we get there and it's not ready. All right, it happens all the time. These they'll these contractors will set some type of ridiculous schedule, and of course, you're going to have all kinds of things that's going to keep them from meeting that goal, and they're shooting craps and they're hoping that they'll get lucky, and you'll just be like, okay, I don't want to come back out here, everything's fine, let me just sign off on it, and then that's just one less thing to have to worry about. If I go out there to a place and it's not ready, then I'll notate in my daily notes or my daily um, log that I went, but the inspection, it wasn't how do I put it? It's not ready for inspection, pretty much. So any which way, the state law requires records to be kept on file for a certain amount of time. In the book, does everybody have the books? Are we waiting on anybody with books?
Yeah, I'm waiting on some from my guys. We had a little run-in with the shipping, but we should have them tomorrow.
Okay, okay. Again, make sure to read the chapters. But in the books, one of the resources is they do have a good chart that has all the different um, retaining and maintenance schedules on it. So that's something good to reference back. Um, but we know that here on this slide, we know that reports are important. It's everyday inspection activity. Um, we use them for plan review and pre-construction design meetings. Um, and those are very important if you go into being an authority or an official, and what you say is what millions of dollars is being spent on a project. You need to have something backed up. I recommend a with everything going on now, and this is an example of something I had to do here recently, is a meeting with a company that's wanting to develop an area for a commercial building within my jurisdiction, and there's certain variances that have to be made because of the water system and so on and so forth. But because of COVID and everything like that, their company's not really wanting to do face-to-face meetings, so it's a teleconference meeting, and they're asking a bunch of things, they're referencing, and as they're referencing, I'm following along in my code book and referencing, pulling up what they're talking about to make sure that I'm, we're on the same page. I like to record those and do a voice recording and save it so that it can be referenced back. And then that way, it's there of what you said and what you didn't say. And then also doing a brief narrative or a little synopsis of that, we held this conference, this telephone conference. This is what was said. This was what was discussed. This is what was asked. This was what was allowed, or this was, so there, everything's covered on that. Um, but that's really important when you're dealing with them, because they'll come back and say, well, you said I could do this. No, I didn't. Um, here's not only my report for our meeting, but also my recording. Now, every fire inspection needs to be recorded. Also, with the documentation, I don't know how things are in Louisiana, but I know in Mississippi, um, if it's a state licensed building or state licensed organization, say it's like a daycare or a child care facility, the state actually has a fire report or a fire inspection report that has to be included, and it's very specific. It's one they provide. So that's something, being familiar, if you live in a jurisdiction or a state that requires a specific form, making sure that that form's used and not a generic or general form. You want to have your documentation for appeals, because people, if they don't get their way, and everybody, um, the Karen virus is spreading much faster than COVID right now. Everybody, if they don't get their way, they like to throw a fit. So when people appeal your decision and your stance on something, you have your documentation to fall back on. Also with legal proceedings, if it ends up going to court, or say that there's an incident at a business, and you did a fire inspection and it's fire related, your documentation is going to be subpoenaed. You are going to be subpoenaed, and you're going to have to report on the conditions and what you found while you were there. And you're going to have to kind of justify that you went in and you conducted it, and at the time of the inspection, the safety standards that you observed and the conditions that you observed was at par, and that there was no dangerous situations there during your inspection, because they'll try to go after everybody, and that way you can be absolved um, from paper, accusation of pencil whipping or anything like that. We want to record their deficiencies and code violations, any modifications to systems and equipment, and that's something you may see that from time to time, where maybe it's an older building, technology comes along, or you may have a fire protection system that a large section goes out, and company ABC built it 20 years ago, and now they're out of business, so company XYZ is having to come in and pretty much re-engineer, and you have certain modifications, so you want to keep track of everything like that. The maintenance and housekeeping for these different businesses and buildings, any changes, anything that you've seen. If there's if you have a place that doesn't remove brush or tall vegetation from around its building, and there ends up being a fire there because of somebody threw out a cigarette lighter or cigarette, and it called up some grass, and then the grass burned the building, and so on and so forth. That's kind of what it's talking about there at housekeeping, so that you can reference back to that you were advised several times to clean up around the property. Hazardous material storage, handling, and use, any other hazardous conditions, emergency plans, drills, and exercises. Those you definitely want to make sure that they get documented. Most of your places that carry a big insurance is going to require that. Your schools also, they're going to have a written emergency plan, and you need to get a copy of that. Also, any type of the fire drills that they have, they're supposed to be keeping documentation, and that may be something that you need to observe in a report, and sign off that you saw it. And any type of exercises that you're involved with. All right, here's an example of a fire inspection report, and here's one that's pretty simple. I kind of like these type of reports where it's kind of checking the box. It's either it's okay or it's not. It's good, it's bad, it's ugly. And then in the bottom, there's a little area for notes, not necessarily a report narrative, but just little notes. And as you can see that they, they note all the different deficiencies and then give a revisit in 6 weeks. So, it tells you what I found and then the time frame you have to fix it. And also up top, you have your all of your different details, phone numbers, the type of occupancy, emergency contacts. Also good for your pre-planning, so that you know who the key holders are. all the good information that you're going to want to know. You keep up with all that. There's some that there's one that's out there that I've seen. I mean, it just asks so much that it doesn't even really matter. I've seen some that just have all kinds of crazy just information that you don't need, but people for whatever reason they feel like they need that kind of information on the report. But it is what it is. Just know your stuff, know what you need, and if you're building a program, that's kind of easy to get started. But know that you may have many different variations of your report over the years as you kind of refine it. All right. Now, some things that affect the communication of information is if it's incomplete or inaccurate observations. And of course, you do not want to halfway do an inspection and an incident occur, and they go back on your reports. You also, and even more, is you do not want to document inaccurate observations, and that's either way. If you see something in your inspection that's a violation, that is an issue in a safety issue, and you just overlook it purposefully, and you say everything's okay, well, if something happens and you get proven wrong, then you're kind of getting discredited. Also, on the other token, you write up something that you have written up for a violation, and it's really not, and you kind of knew about it. That's another way to really destroy your credibility. All right, anytime, and that goes into the personal bias or opinion, improper grammar, word usage, or spelling. And that's one of those things that most people kind of use a report that's handwritten because it's easy. I'm one of those people. Everybody, y'all all know, me and technology don't mix. I have people tell me all the time, "Oh, you can get one of these iPod or iPad, blah blah blah, professional, and you get this program, and it'll do this and it'll do that." And I guarantee you, first time I get out in the field, it's probably going to crap the bed on me. So I'm more kind of the old school that um, I like to have the pen and paper and handwritten, and that way, the ones I like has the carbon copies in them, so that I have a copy that I can hand to the owner of the property or whatever right then and there. But it may be in the best interest for your department if it's a bigger department, where that information needs to be saved in a server, data bank, so on and so forth. You use that technology to your advantage. Now, the good thing about the technology is there are programs that, like spell check, that will check your grammar, your sentence structure, your spelling, and all that. And anything that interferes with clarity, and I think that kind of falls into what I was speaking about earlier about making sure that it's wrote in a way that the recipient can understand it. All right, field notes is your own scene description of your observations at the time of the inspection, and then it can remind you of any to perform additional research or documentation. You may have something that may be a head scratcher, so you need to bounce that off of a couple people, especially if you have a occupancy change and you're going for an inspection for a certificate of occupancy, and you don't know if it's there, if it will work for the new building, or according to your agency and your agency's policies on how you're going to deal with pre-existing structures. The conditions in there were fine for the code whenever it was built, but maybe it's changed occupancies several times over the years, but they never changed enough of it structurally, or changing to a different occupancy group to justify remodels that would have to include bringing it all up to new code spec. So it's always good to keep those notes and excuse me, document those observations. All right, you have your field notes, and that's kind of what I was talking about there. Is your handwritten format recorded with a handheld computer or a tablet or with a voice recorder. And those voice recorders and video recorders like body cameras, you can find some good ones that are cheap and they work great. And if you feel like you need to have one on you to protect yourself and what you're doing and what you're seeing, then by all means use it. All right, you have your sketches and diagrams and photos, and by doing that, you're gonna capture your observed conditions, and it also kind of gives you a rough draft of your different rooms and the layout of the building, your doorways and egress assemblies and all that. Um, if it's something really important, then you may want to include photographs and include that. These are things that can be shared and included in pre-fire planning. And it said, with the diagrams saying it should be drawn to scale and use standard mapping symbols, and that's right. You do want to kind of have it where people can pick it up and anybody can look at it and understand what it is and read it. But that's something where your diagrams typically later, your sketches just kind of something quick, fast, and your photographs is it helps you to remind what you saw, but you know they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you can show somebody a picture and show the unsafe conditions, especially if you're building your case to have something taken care of, um, or if it's just part of it and you need to relay that in your pre-planning to your guys if there's an incident there, having those photographs of what you're looking at and what you're looking for definitely help. um, you know they should be professional and well written, following a uh, good format. If you include a little narrative to explain what you saw and what you did, it needs to be focused, concise. It don't there's no room for bias in what we're doing and how we're dealing with the public. Um, it says in here your opinion, but your opinion is as a subject matter expert. So that's something that you could put in notating in your documentation or your whatever document that you're doing. If you're writing a narrative, you can put that your opinion is this based on that, based on your observations and so on and so forth, but not criticism. And again, you want it to look good and sound right, so proper grammar, spelling, punctuation, and all that. Especially if you're in an agency where your reports could go to court, um, or if everything has the potential for lawyers to get involved, and if they do, they're going to attack every little thing. They're going to try to discredit you and make you look like an idiot. And by doing this, you definitely have your ducks in a row and better prepared. And when possible, avoid your passive sentencing. Have it as concise statements. Um, all right, we want to include the property information, your location, your size, your uh, building type, um, all that. Your contact information of your property owner. Your owner may be different from your renter, so you also want to have that. Both of those included. I know in Mississippi that the renter has the right of the property because they legally possess that property, but you still want to have the property owner's information. All right, your inspection and specific information. If there's something very specific, you'll definitely want to notate that and all the details with it, and any follow-up information. That's something that you can put on such and such date at such and such time, performed an inspection at 123 4th Street, saw the following violations. You may have a system where it's a running report, where the report is is fluid in the fact that it can be changed. And then you can put at such and such other date at such and such time, return to conduct a follow-up inspection at 123 4th Street and found that the previous violations had been corrected, so on and so forth. So that way you can, if you do kind of a running report or a live report, you notate the previous violations and then notate that in your reinspection those issues were taken care of. That kind of falls into your reinspection reports. And in what it's talking about here is that if you do see a violation, you go back and fix it. You don't have to conduct the inspection from the top to the bottom again. And in that report, as a kind of a follow-up report, if it is a separate report, and you treat it as a separate incident, then you can go but only you can go do the report, you can notate things, but just focus on the things that need to have been corrected, and not really kind of, I guess, wearing it out on all the different violations that you saw, just or all the things that you observed during that inspection. Just kind of hit the violations that you're there to check and recheck on. Any planned reinspection dates and your contact information. You definitely want to include who you are so that you can be referenced back that that's your report. Always end on a positive note. I think that's kind of funny because you have some situations that you're not going to, especially when you have violations or you have issues with. So, but yeah, I really don't know how on that to really talk about how to end a report on a positive note, unless it's problems are taken care of. But your final notice. All right, now this is something according to your procedures on how you're going to handle fire code violations. You can use this if they make little to no effort to correct the problems. There's a next step of either filing a complaint, signing an affidavit, or having some type of punitive measure against the business. And that's really going to depend on the authority having jurisdiction as to what its plan and its policies are to handle that. Now, you can also have exigent or any type of like dangerous, life-threatening situations that are occurring right then and there. That's where you can order a stop work order, or you can order for a business to be shut down, and you can close off the occupancy. You can have the power disconnected. You can shut the doors. You can have people removed off the property and shut the doors and lock it down, and until the further processes are that you go through the further processes. And that's also where in some jurisdictions you may have to have some type of law enforcement involvement in it. But if you're seeing some life-threatening situations that's being done, Now that's again going to be according to your jurisdiction, but that's where you shut them down and close down shop until you can meet with the property owner or the renter or the business, um, whoever can call shots and make stuff happen with the business, meeting with them to give what needs to be fixed to resolve the issue and a time frame to do it in. All right. You have letters used for final notices and reminders. You can also do it in a simple inspection report. When I worked for Poplarville, we have a college that we will go and tour, um, where they needed some type of documentation for every time that I came and done a report, and I did that in letter form, and I was able to talk about each building that I inspected and the deficiencies that I found, and also referenced the violation in the code, so that they were aware this is what the issue was. Here's where it says in the book, and here's a time frame that it needs to be corrected in. You also can have it, cover letters, um, and those can be set up in a lot of different ways. You have some that'll kind of have like a brief synopsis of the situation if it's a very detailed inspection report, or if it's a running inspection report with a lot of different issues that's trying to be resolved. But always, always, always be professional, be courteous. Um, you can definitely handle the situation without kind of shining your rear, as some people may say. You want to, in your letters, be clean and consistent. They need a header, salutation, body, closing, signature, any enclosures, copies. If you carbon copy anybody, list that. Um, making it look professional. It also helps in the validity of you and your office, your authority, and your ability to do your job. If you look professional and you act professional and you do things professionally, they're less likely to buck you on things and cause issues with you. Email, it's kind of a less formal means. You can respond to a request of information or give a code interpretation. One of the things about the codes is they don't want you to make a copy of the code, but you can cite the code and can cite specific verbiage in the code section. And that's where you can do that back and forth with email, and that's typically at the point where either on new construction, or if there's an issue that you're trying to get resolved, a major issue, and you're getting more flies with honey than with vinegar. Then at that point, you're kind of working with somebody. So emailing back and forth is a way to quickly respond and quickly relay information. Excuse me. But also to document your conversation and document what was said and how it was, and that it was received and when it was received and all that. Any type of your legal documents, your work products, or official records, you can include those. What I always like to do is that if email, and especially right now with COVID and everything going around, that's kind of how people are communicating. That's how work's getting done. And you can scan in a document and include that as an attachment back and forth, and that helps to reach people a little bit easier and a little bit more quickly. And then you want to make sure to save the emails and keep them in part of a case file for, say you have a construction project, a new construction, and you're the code official, that you're having to keep up with everything and all every step of from the time of the permit or plans submission to the final inspection. You keep everything together, and this is part of it. That if you're corresponding back and forth, and you're having open dialogue with a developer, an engineer, an architect, whoever, make sure that you're retaining all this so that you can refer back to it later if you need to. Especially if you have a building department in your city that you can that they may log all the information on a specific building and keep a building history uh, case file, and you can include all that in there. Checklist, and that's kind of the fire inspection form that we saw earlier in the slideshow. Is it's pretty simple form for preliminary inspections. There are some that are multi-page that have an area for diagrams and photos, and follow up with that with a formal written report, or either a narrative somewhere on there, kind of explaining what you did, what you saw, and all that. But it needs to be clean and have a consistent format, not just stuff all scattered all over the page and all that. Here's an example. Personally, I like to keep them on one page if at all possible. But sometimes we can't do that. Sometimes we need a little bit more information. Sometimes the format and things that are required makes it where we have to have more than one page. But in either which way, I like the checkbox type, and it's just kind of how you put it together. And then your detailed reports, and in kind of the way that I look at a detailed report is it's kind of like a case file, like a manila folder that has all this information in here. Can have several documents in it. That's where your detailed reports are going to come. You may even include printed out photographs. But this is all kinds of things that you need to include together. Kind of to bring it in perspective, our state fire marshal's office, they have reports that sometimes reach into the close to 100 pages to make sure that everything's documented, everything is included in their official report. It may be overkill for a lot of the things that you encounter and that you deal with, or it may be write the ticket. It's just according to your situation and what you have going on, and how that you want to maintain all that information. We kind of hit all this. If it's inspection with multiple occupancies, where maybe that you're including a detailed report for a month, or a monthly inspection report, that if you need to turn it into your, for the city, either a city council, board of aldermen, if you have to have a monthly report of your work that has to go on any type of board minutes, you can include the detailed report as far as that you've done so many inspections and what you found and all that. They may be handwritten or typed, but use a clean, consistent, professional format according to how big it is and how you prepare it. It may be a case file that maybe you're preparing all your stuff to go to court, and you want you may have a tab page or an appendices or a table of contents where you reference everything that's included in that report. All right, recording complaints. Now, everybody can pay attention to this. This is something that's part of your skill packet. It's how to deal with complaints, and you're going to deal with the complaints one way or the other. You're going to deal with these with complaints as a fire inspector. So that's when either a member of the public or some other entity or whatever indicates that there's a safety issue at a certain building. Um, and you want to document all this because you don't know how far the rabbit hole goes, right? You want to make sure that it has everything in it that you may need later if it snowballs and turns into a really big deal. So you want to get the time and date where it was when you received the complaint, um, the location of the or the address of whatever building is has the violation in it, the complainant name and contact information, because you may have to reference back to them. It may be something you go look at and like, well, Miss Karen, I don't see what you're talking about. Or it may be something that you don't see that you may have to look at a different area or different part of the building, or maybe it's an unsafe practice that they're reporting that you have to see it in a certain way. But definitely document the nature of the problem, um, and then document that you conducted an inspection based on a complaint that you received, the results of the inspection, what you found, what needed to be done to correct the violation, and the time frame you expect it to be handled in. Now you can, as far as the inspection parts, you can have that standard inspection form, and it'll work for notating what's in a complaint or what is the complaint that you received. Ugh. But that's something. If there's any life-threatening problems, a big number of issues, then you might want to write an official letter on official letterhead, and that way that you can, some people say they write their ugly letter, and that's where that they kind of get on to the people over a letter. Maybe it's hard to contact somebody, so you send it certified mail or some means like that. So getting into the code references, to document a violation, to indicate a violation as well as what must be done to correct it. When you do that, it serves two purposes. If a person wants to research the code, especially if they want to fight you on it or they want to argue your interpretation of it, then you can say, hey, here's what it says, and it says this. You have X number of people in here, so it is this type of occupancy, and now it changes that you're now required to have this, this, and that. And that's something, if you end up dealing like with different contractors in construction of certain buildings, and you have to, especially if you have to have fire protection features in the building, their job is to try to build whatever they need to as cheaply as possible, and if they can cut corners or they can um, get you to where you'll say, oh yeah, you don't need that, you don't need this, they're going to do it. Something that I ended up working an incident, or not an incident, but an inspection that I was doing. It was on an addition to a convalescent care facility, um, and this contractor wanted to base the occupancy on a residential occupancy. Now you can still operate a convalescent care facility if you have less than 50, or less than 16 patients or 16 um, clients. All right, you can it'll fall under the residential code of it, and there are certain changes on what's required as far as the construction and the protection side of it. But he was wanting to do an addition that would put his number over, and that would actually put it in as an institutional occupancy that would have more stringent requirements on construction and protection features and so on and so forth. Um, and he wanted to argue me back and forth on this, and that's where I referenced code, and where I recited to him the specific verbiage in the code, and then He's like, oh, okay, you're actually checking, you're actually looking, and he followed it, and that at that point, he knew that I was into the code book, that I knew what needed to be in place without question. So then at that point, he started getting into the code book, and it made the rest of the process so much easier. Just my little war story on that, but um, especially if there's an agency that has a legal team, or if it's a higher risk occupancy. One of the things we do is we would inspect dorm rooms twice a year. Once before the fall semester, once before the spring semester. We would go through the dorm buildings at the local college, and any violations that I found, I wrote down in a letter format, and I notated the specific code so that they couldn't go back and have it as an argument on stance of opinion, but in fact on standardized code, and did that to protect me, and also um, it just kind of takes care of a lot of headache and issues on the back end. But it also gives the owner the opportunity to investigate the violation. If they see it, oh, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you needed this, or it had to be like that. And they can understand. Some do, some don't. They still want to argue, but it's good to reference those codes, and it'll come out, especially if it snowballs. It goes into something, a much situation that's much bigger. Then you have that there, and you have it available to reference to, specifically what you cited. Um, Now, your documentation becomes part of the permanent record for the building or occupancy, and you use that as a tool to improve the fire safety, and can be used in legal proceedings. Um, your retention requirements is, if it's archival or permanent, it's forever. Essential, it's short range. To archival, official public record, it's short range. To archival, and office files and memoranda is short range. It's coordinated what's all included in there, and on in your book, again, there is a list that talks about the different um, retention table. And then your different rules apply to the different types of records. Each state does have some records retaining laws, and the best way to find out what those are is to contact whoever in your city or your jurisdictions, um, whether it be city hall, board of supervisors office, council office, city manager's office, whatever. Um, they have to follow all these laws and these rules. They're audited every year on them, and they'll be able to find out, if you don't know, if it's something that doesn't really fall into your standard uh, records system. They'll be able to get you in touch with whoever you need to for guidance on that. Now, inspection files are often kept longer than your legal requirements, especially if it's a long-term occupancy of the building, um, or if you have a change of occupancy where fire protection features had to be changed or something like that. You definitely want to keep all that longer than normal, something to reference back to, especially if it's shortly after that occupancy change. The Freedom of Information Act, all right, applies only to federal documents, but many states have similar legislation. Um, I don't know Louisiana's stance on it, but Mississippi um, does have a Freedom of Information legislation, and each law includes the provisions on how the public can start that request, how long an agency has to respond, any fees that are charged to process that request, um, if the agency can ask about why you want it, and then whatever the penalties are if the agency refuses or doesn't follow through within the time frame. Nope. Most of your agencies have a Freedom of Information officer. Most of your documents are public records. There's very little nowadays that is not public records. So, if you have something that is part of the Freedom of Information Act, but you have information on, say, a report that doesn't need to be released, then that needs to be redacted in whatever acceptable way, whether it's white out, mark through, black marker, whatever. But as a fire inspector, you should supply that information as long as it's you're legally able to do so. And some different organizational practices, different agencies have different ways in the way that they arrange or index files. Some do it by address, some cross-reference back and forth, maybe a lot number or a property number, like a property PIN number. But whatever it is, make sure it's a consistent file format. It kind of makes it easier if you streamline in with the way that your authority or your jurisdiction maintains that on other records. Or if you have it on part of your report and you have the means to locate, say, a building on a certain parcel of property, you can include that parcel number in with it. Just some redundancy on identifying the location. All right. Also, people have it in a chronological format, and that can be in by date of your inspection, functional format, and you see here you have your annual inspections, re-inspections, compliant inspections, final inspections. I actually did it the way that I maintain my inspection files was by group. That I would have all my different groups listed, all my mercantile businesses, my educational, institutional, so on and so forth. And that way I could focus on my different threat areas and all that. Right or wrong, it's just a way of doing it. Electronic reporting systems, the advantage is you're able to put it in there and run a certain algorithm that you can research code issues. In the field, you can, things are saved on a server. You can access it anywhere that you have access. Some has, some people have a printer in their vehicle where they can print out things that they may need. Typically, you have fewer errors in that. It's easier to correct and go back and change things if need be. If you have a running report or a fluid report, another good thing about electronic reporting systems is that you can include several different types of media. You can include your pictures digitally as part of your report, GPS functions on certain devices, so on and so forth. There's a lot of advantages unless you're like me and technology hates you and wants to always go down when you're trying to use it. But you have to, it's good to have certain access policies, who has the ability and authority to access certain information, so on and so forth. All right, your legal proceedings. And your inspection documentation is subject to be used in legal proceedings. Your information can be subpoenaed and anything associated with it for years and years. And if you have to go to court to present either evidence or for 100 other reasons of why you may have to go to court as a fire inspector, you need to prepare for it, review all of the building's records, and understand what the code requires and what the intent of the code is in your interpretation if you're an official, and how it applies, how it needs to be corrected, and to what level of protection for the reasons that you're and the reasons that you want to obtain a certain level of protection. If you have to take part in legal proceedings, you want to make sure that you act and look professional. You may have a Class A uniform that you want to wear with your shine brass and boots and all that. I'm a very big proponent in looking professional, because that's half the battle. Because if you go in there looking like who'd have thought, then people are less likely to take you seriously on what you're trying to do. But if you go in and look squared away and professional, there's a visual confidence that people have in you, and in your ability to also to speak and relay that information. May be a big subconscious help whenever you're having to deal with legal proceedings. When you're in there and you're basically you're testifying, and you may do it under oath. I know that from a couple of incidences, certain city organizations like Board of Aldermen and Board of Supervisors can put you under oath in a hearing that they conduct, and so you're testifying under oath. But knowing that, state only the facts. It's kind of one of those things you don't want to really elaborate on a whole lot, because then you start having the ability to open up holes. So state the facts, not what you think or what you feel. All right. So real quick summary: we got to document everything. It needs to be done right, and our goal is to be able to communicate what we see, what we find, and what needs to be done to the owner, to remind ourselves what we did, and to future generations of fire inspectors if they're looking back on a building and seeing what issues has happened in the past, and so on and so forth. You want to maintain your records and documentation of your different existing conditions, violations, and corrective actions. Your written records eliminate a barrier of communication. Oh, excuse me again. Of trying to remember what exactly was said, who you spoke to, and all that. Good field notes can help you in part of your files, and then also to gaining information for your reports and your documentation. Any sketches, diagrams, and photos, they give the visual information part of your report. They should include the property information, contact information, the information that's specific to the inspection, and any type of follow-ups. Reinspection reports, you just need to document the violations that you found before, and if they were taken care of. You make sure that you handle up on complaints. You may get some good information from people that file a complaint and having the ability to take care of that complaint. Give the owner an opportunity to investigate the violation, and give them that code reference so that they can follow up on, so that they can see what you're seeing. And your inspection files are subject to records retention, and make sure that you're keeping them properly. Make sure that you're filing these away in a way that can be easily researched and found in the future, not just all thrown into a desk drawer. And keep in mind, this is a very true statement here, that a code violation may begin with a notation on a fire inspection form and may end up in a courtroom. So definitely want to have your ducks together if you ever have to go and sit in a box in a courtroom. All right, guys, do we have any questions on that? No, we're kind of moving.
Yeah,
I got a quick question, real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
Talking about basically referring to re-inspections and stuff like that. In your opinion, what is an acceptable time frame? I know it probably depends on the violation, but just a simple violation, maybe a problem with a date on a fire extinguisher. Just say, what's in your opinion, what's an acceptable time frame to give them to fix that issue?
To me, it's according, and that's the thing. For something simple like that, reasonably, if they have access to get that squared away, something really simple like that, I'd say a couple weeks. And that's kind of when I try to work it around as kind of when you're planning on re-inspecting, or if you're doing any other inspections or something like that. You want to give them enough time to where reasonably that a person can handle that situation and get it taken care of. Um, and that does one of two things. It does the right thing. It gives them time to fix it. A lot of these business owners, they may not know. There's a lot of times that I'll do an inspection and they're contracted with whatever fire extinguisher company, and they may miss some. They send Jim Bob down with the fire extinguisher van, and he goes and retags and does the annual service and maintenance on them, and he forgets one or two. It's kind of something I don't really ding them too hard on, but it's letting them have that time to fix it. But it also shows that, hey, I'm not really being a butthole about it. I'm giving you time enough to take care of the problem. According to whatever other situation, I mean, it could be from 2 weeks to 30 days. Um, but that's really kind of what you're feeling. Um, if it's something that's more significant on the safety scale, I would say, if you say like, hey, this needs to be done like this week, I'm coming back Friday and this needs to be done, or we're going to the next step. I've had to do that a couple times before, especially if you're having somebody who's kind of dragging their feet or something. Um, but that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, I asked because we had a situation. It's actually a convenience store, and they have, of course, a kitchen where they fry chicken and all that stuff. And my guy had went out and did an inspection on it, and they didn't have all the paperwork to back up the cleaning and servicing of the hood system. He wrote him he wrote him a violation on that, basically just, hey, you need to get this taken care of. He goes back a month later and nothing's been done about it. So he gives him another warning, goes back a month later, and they still hadn't done nothing about it. And the guy basically was using the excuse, oh, I can't get in touch with nobody to come do it. I can't get in touch with nobody to come do it. Basically, I got to digging into it just a little bit and found out that he couldn't find nobody to come do it because the last time he had somebody come out and do it, he gave them a bad check and they spread the word to the rest of the company so nobody would deal with this guy.
Yeah.
So basically what we did is we just wrote a report on it and forwarded it to the state fire marshal's office and let them deal with it. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. But we had to drag it out for 2 or 3 months to get to that point. So I'm just kind of asking to see if, maybe I feel like we gave him ample enough time. And then the whole time he's lying to us,
And that's it. And that's something, if you end up having to go to court, you can show your due diligence and that you, being a reasonable inspector, gave them reasonable amount of time. And that's something that I would include in documentation. And what I was talking about, a running report, you can put in that on such and such time, I spoke to so and so, such and such, that found that at during this time frame, he wrote a hot check to the company and that he no longer wants anybody to do business with him. That builds your case in saying that, hey, this guy's he's breaking the law on this, that, and the other. It just kind of paints the whole picture, and every little bit of thing helps. Um, and I'm glad that you mentioned that there. In that incident, one of the biggest pain in the rears to deal with is the 3 words is deep fat fryers. Because nobody wants to maintain their systems. And you can look in the code, and there's actually in the IFC, they have, if you use it for a certain type, you have to have them clean much more often than if you only use it for so much and so on. And that's where it kind of comes into the inspector really looking at the totality of the circumstances there as to what they're going to enforce. Is it your belief that they're using it to that level or not, or so on and so forth? And that's kind of where you can notate in your report that you see a significant amount of grease buildup in the grease traps, or you see that there's a significant amount of dust or debris or whatever in the grease traps or in the inside the hood area, indicating that they're not regularly cleaning it like they should, and they're not having it professionally cleaned like they should. And you can another part of documentation, and with that specific thing is taking pictures of the frangible bulbs or the not in the fusible links. That's what I meant to say, is the fusible links in the hood system. And I would take a picture of it. And if you go back and and I know there's different documentation, and I've heard it all. I've heard of, well, no, they didn't put a sticker. They gave me a piece of paper, and they said that I just had to show you the piece of paper. Nah, you're full of crap. This is the way it's supposed to be done. And you go and you pull that panel and you look at the fusible link, and you can pull from your previous documentation, hey, this is the same link. You're not having anything worked on. You're just kind of building your case. But it's according to how far that you need to push it, and that's one of those things. So if it gets into a kind of an enforcement area, y'all can call in the state, and the state kind of handles that.
Yeah, our inspectors, the guy we had, he was certified and basically commissioned by the fire marshal's office to do inspections within our jurisdiction. So he had the ability to go out and do these inspections and documentation and all that stuff. But when it come down really to, I guess, hard enforcement with actually giving fines, we just opted to bring the fire marshal's office in and do that part of it. So basically we just, go in, do the inspection, note what we see, and kind of give them a written deal to say, hey, look, this is what we found, this is what needs addressing, and then we just follow it up, which since then I've rewritten all of the procedures for how we're going to do inspections and all that, and it's more uniform and actually have a set procedure as to not necessarily how you conduct the inspection, but to make sure the inspections are done like they're supposed to, when they're supposed to be done, and all the documentation is maintained. Because like I said last night, it was, or the night before, it was just kind of just, okay, you're an inspector, go out and do these inspections, and there was no other checks and balances in the system. It was just hope the guy was doing what he was supposed to be doing, and it turns out that was not at all.
Oh yeah, and that's one of those things. It's dealing with people, and
I've rewritten all that with the state farm. But yeah, we got a good working relationship with the fire marshal's office. So once these guys that's in this class and myself get on board and what we need to start doing it, then it's going to be a whole lot easier on us.
There you go. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's hard to kind of get a program up and going, but once you do, it kind of helps out in the long run, because if you develop it with the ground up or from the ground up with a good idea of what it needs, how it needs to function, then you'd be good to go. That's kind of the big problem with Mississippi, is that it kind of relies on the authority, the jurisdiction, and you may have politicians that don't want their businesses messed with, quote unquote. So they typically don't. They're not as supportive um, of fire prevention efforts. All right, well, we're going to roll right into fire inspector. Everybody still with me? Everybody still good to go?
Yep. Yeah.
All right. All right. So performing the inspection. We're going to talk about the different type of inspections, when a fire inspector should inspect a building, the pre-inspection process, and the fire inspection process. Describe how to verify the proper installation and maintenance of heat, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, kitchen cooking equipment, laundry chutes, elevators and escalators. How to verify that a new construction project meets all the code standards and policies. How to verify a remodeling project meets all the code standards and policies. When and how to cite code violations. Um, how to ensure that code violations are corrected. How to investigate a complaint against an occupancy and ensure that the complaint is resolved. And describe the role of a fire inspector too in improving the fire inspection process. All right. I think it's really important that we talked about documentation, because we know that we need to document our stuff. We need to be observant, and we need to be aware of our observations and be able to recall them sometime in the future. So we'll kind of go through this, pretty quickly. The skill objective is to perform a fire inspection of a structure. We're going to do that on our field trip, and we'll go through a lot of this and kind of tie it all in together. So fire inspector, our main objective is to inspect to ensure the safety of the occupants inside of a certain type of building. We're going to talk about the some of the big interests that we have is the occupant load, or how many people can be in a certain building, how far it is to the exits, the number of exits, is it enough to supply the amount of people in there. Proper door swing, that's a big one, especially if you have older buildings in your jurisdiction. Fire alarm and sprinkler protection. All right, you have your annual inspections. In larger jurisdictions, every commercial business is subject to be inspected for fire safety issues. That's not always the case. In smaller departments, smaller jurisdictions, like I said, you may have some political interference to where they don't want annual inspections being done only if there's a problem. So they only want you if there's a complaint to follow up an inspection or something. There's some ridiculous means like that. Smaller departments, some don't have a fire prevention program to regularly inspect. They just kind of do what they can with what resources they have available, and you can only do what you can do. But when you do conduct a fire inspection, it needs to be done properly and professionally. Your re-inspections, if you have a violation, we know we're going to go back and check on that. And then your complaint inspections, we talked a lot about that and how to document and handle those. Construction or final inspections, and that's typically where we're going to make sure that it's ready to be signed off on, and that it's ready to be occupied, and make sure that it has all of its features that's required for that specific type of occupancy group. If there's a business license or change of occupancy inspection, if you have a building that was say it's a ladies' clothing store, and then in a strip mall, and then that closed down, and then they open up a fried chicken joint, there's a lot that has to be done to get that area available or ready to be able to operate a fried chicken restaurant inside of it. So we go in to make sure that it's, all those features are in place. All right, we have self inspections. That sometimes you'll have inspectors or business owners that'll call up and say, hey, I would like for the fire department to come look, and what do I need? And they want to be informed, and that's a good opportunity to step off on the right foot with these business owners, and to say, hey, we're not here to shut you down. I'm not here to really bust you down. I'm here to help you. We're going to work on this together, and we'll get you to where you need to be. If you can do that, if you can work with somebody and help them along the way, you typically end up having a better relationship with your business community inside of your jurisdiction. And then also you tend to actually have it done and have it as an important thing that your business owner cares about. You have some of them that just don't care. It's, just whatever, don't bother me, go away kind of thing. But if you have them that they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, then they're more likely to follow through with it and make sure that everything stays maintained. But it's typically, you can educate them on performing on smaller buildings, but you still want to go in and provide that professional inspection. When is the best time to inspect? And I know it's talking about something different here, but that's a very good question. If you have, say, a daycare that you need to go and inspect, do you want to go right when they're trying to put the kids down for a nap, during lunchtime, during times when it's hectic? So you're trying to coordinate the best as possible. If you can take those little things to make the experience a little bit easier or better for them, it helps you out in the long run. It says the best time to inspect before the construction phase. All right, that's part of your plans review. So that's something that you can, if you inspect it, basically what a plans review is you're inspecting the building on paper prior to it being built. So that way you can look through it and what is all supposed to be there, and if there's any big changes or any type of protection devices that need to be in place, you can notate that and get it on the plans. Waiting for last minute can reveal violations that can't be readily fixed, and you can open up a can of worms on that. So you want to be involved throughout the processes, and especially with developmental construction projects, you really want to try to work with them the best as possible, unless they really kind of are a pain. But if you work with them, they tend to include you more and take what you say seriously, and more likely to get it on the right foot right off the bat. If according to how hard-nosed that your fire prevention program is, it can deny or postpone an opening date until all the violations are fixed, and then or you can have something with the opening with a conditional approval. All right. For an example, had a school, an elementary school, that needed a certificate of occupancy, and I was contacted a week before school starting to inspect the buildings to allow the students to return. Well, go in there and things are not in order. Things are not ready. The fire, it called for a fire suppression system, for a sprinkler system. It wasn't ready. And the alarm system, because of the additions and what they had put, and the alarm system wasn't ready. So then that's where the conditional approval, and it's a short range. We're still working on that agreement. That's where we had to write up a letter of agreement. But basically what I did was worked with them, and I said, okay, here's where I'm going to be hard-nosed. I want the sprinkler system in full operation, tested and ready to go before students come in the building. I want it tagged. I want the FDCs in place. I want everything ready to go. So however that you need to make that happen, wave your magic wand and make it happen. So now the alarm system, and I cited a section of the code that since the alarm system wasn't up, they had to pay, or they had to hire on and maintain fire watchers during the time frame of while the alarm system was down. Now they since have gotten all that corrected, but that was the conditions that allowed for them to have a temporary certificate of occupancy to be able to open up the school and to start school on time. That's one of those things. It's understanding the intent of the code and what you can do, working with people to kind of help going on. It wasn't necessarily their fault. The construction company had some issues here and there, but with the COVID pandemic, it was hard for them to get the construction components that they needed, the construction workers that they needed, the specialty technicians that they needed on that project. So I mean, it's not something that you can really ding them really hard on, because they didn't. It's not their fault. So that's a good example on a conditional approval. All right, your pre-inspection process. You can review your previous fire inspection reports, especially if you have a bunch of buildings to inspect in your jurisdiction. Um, it all is going to blend together. So you need to kind of refresh on if you have a day that you have several planned, you may want to pull the previous files on those locations and kind of go through them. You just also it helps that if you look at your key holder information or the owner information or renter information to make sure that nothing's changed on that, and it kind of keeps up your documents up to date. Any correspondence that was in there, any bonifications to the buildings, any plans and specifications that you need to be aware of, the building department's records, any permits that were pulled. An as-built diagram shows the final installation of how it was actually completed. Was talking about there. Excuse me. You may have a set of plans that was approved, but during the construction process, it couldn't be done that way. So some little changes were made, and then you have as it was actually built. So you want to know that those are a thing that you may have to reference to an as-built diagram, and you can get that typically if it's a newer construction. You can get that from the construction or architectural company that has that contract. Any past occupancy records may indicate anything that you need to be aware of. Review your local codes and ordinances if it's something that falls into that category, so where you're kind of refreshed on it. Refreshed your categories of your building construction, because that's all going to, all the information here that's listed is going to kind of guide you as to what you're going to do if you have to make any decisions on your inspection or any type of changes. It's also going to let you know that, hey, you're dealing with this level of protection, and that's why this, that, or the other has been required for this building. Your occupancy classification on how the space is being used, and your different types are identified in your IFC or your NFPA code sets. Know what you can legally enforce. Kind of like what we talked about at a certain level. Do you need to turn it over to another agency? Do you need to, where are you able to push this if you need to? Any legislation that enables you to do that. So, and then your jurisdiction may require an authority to inspect. And you may have like a certification or renewal, maybe part of the business license or something like that. So you kind of being aware of how the kind of your building department and your city operates, or your jurisdiction operates. All right, you want to have some writing tools, forms, flashlight, measuring tape, step ladder, pitot tube. These are some things that you might need. Don't go up there for a simple inspection with your step ladder and your pitot tube. If you don't need it, leave it in the truck, leave it in the vehicle. I would recommend having it with you just in case, because as soon as you're like, no, I won't need that step ladder, is when you're really going to have to look above ceiling tiles, or really look into something, and you wish you would have had it. Your pitot tubes, if you know that you're going to be doing any type of checking the water system or checking fire flow, make sure to grab that so you'll have it. You might need a calculator, camera, any type of safety equipment that you may need. Any electronic devices, batteries. That's one of the things I carry, like a case, a literal case of batteries for my camera and other devices that I use regularly. So make sure that you have that, because camera batteries will go out right when you're in the middle of taking photographs. Coveralls, because you may have to crawl around or deal with something that's funky or nasty, and you don't want to. If you're like all the other inspectors in these pictures, you don't want to get your pretty white shirt dirty, especially for the chiefs in the crowd. That was one of those things. While I was a chief, I wore a white shirt for about the first few months, and then swapped over to a navy blue shirt because they kept ruining the white shirts and getting all kinds of stuff all over them. Inspections can be dirty business if you're going through and looking at all the different aspects of it. Your forms, we talked about your documentation, the business name, address, phone number, your inspection dates, your area being inspected, if it's kind of a large complex or something. Any of your has to list any of your code violation citations, spot for a reinspection, your signatures, and you want to have an I'm glad this brought this up, because the other one didn't, and I didn't even think about noticing it or mentioning it. But you want them to be able to signs, knowing, especially if there's a violation, have them sign that, showing that they acknowledged that there was an issue and it needed to be fixed within that time period. If they refuse to sign, put on there, refuse to sign, and have a witness sign it. That way that you can prove that, hey, you were here, you knew about this. That's part of that, repairing whatever issues within a reasonable amount of time. Any type of brief legal statements, you have a little area for little notes and narrative on your report. Complaint form, and they honestly can be one and the same, but all that same information. Having your complainant's information on there is paramount. Their phone number, so that you can call them and reference, ask any follow-up questions or anything that you might need. if you do a separate complaint form, it's pretty much an inspection form, because you're going to inspect whatever violation that's being complained on, but it also will, you should include that complaining information, and that is something that you can include on a regular inspection form. All right. You may have a final or a construction inspection form. You may have your certificate of occupancy. Ours is a form that has to have a signature on it from the building official and the fire marshal to be able to own some commercial occupancies for the final inspection. And then a stop work order. That is another form of documentation that you want to include in your case file. But if you have to issue a stop work order, you want to have that form and a copy of it in hand. And then whatever needs to be, and it may not be a completely, hey, everybody put down your tools and step away. It may be that, hey, stop connecting in this HVAC system because it's all completely wrong, as an example. And then you can note what needs to be corrected and get that going. Again, same thing, inspection checklist that we already saw. All right, inspections can be scheduled or unannounced, but you go in there unannounced, there's always going to be some issue. Some of your bigger cities where you have a fire prevention bureau, especially if a passing fire inspection is contingent on their operational, their business permit. You have a little bit more teeth in that to be able to enforce that. But you have to remember this is private property as well. And it goes on to say that you can only conduct the fire inspections with the permission of the owner. Now, on owner, I don't like the way that it says owner. And I want to clarify, it's not necessarily the owner of the property. It's the owner of the business or whoever's the agent of the owner. So say that a person owns a ladies' clothing store. We're just going to keep using that as an example. And the owner's not there, but the supervisor, the manager, whoever's in charge, whoever the owner has put to operate in their stead, can give you permission as well. But you start getting into some legal issues. Now, this is except for exigent circumstances. An example. All right, I'm not picking on anybody. Please don't take this any way. This is just explaining what had happened. All right, this come from a complaint that was received because of a video that came on over social media of a nail salon in a certain city, that some people were outside of a nail salon in a parking lot. They were outside. They were just hanging around, goofing off, and they took video of things flaming up in this nail salon and fire and this, that, and the other. It went on social media. It was soon reported to me. So we had people go by there to find out what is going on. Is there a fire in there? And get there to find that it was smoke. There was smoke inside. Ended up speaking to the owners, and come to find out it was the people who were working in there. This was at night, so I mean it was dark. They were closed, but there you have open fire inside of a building that you're seeing, and it's what appeared to be unsafe conditions on this video. So anyway, went and made contact with them. Come to find out, they had a prayer shrine, and they were lighting candles. And for whatever reason, whatever they were using to light the candles, had a fire, and it kind of the way that it reflected off of different items in the shrine, it made the fire look a lot bigger than what it was. So that's where you kind of can come in some exigent circumstances there. But those also cover if there's a reported fire, reported smoke, so on and so forth. If you believe that there's an emergency that's taking place, then you have the legal ability to go in there and check out that situation. All right. So whenever you get there, seek the owner's permission. According to where you're at in the world, you can be um, welcomed with open arms. Yes, please. Thank you for coming and inspecting my building. Look around and anything that you want or anything you need to. If you need anything, let me know. And then you have some that are, hell no, I don't like the government. I don't like the mayor so and so. You're not looking around. This is my private business. Keep your nose out of it. I've seen both of it. But if you go and you go in with the attitude of, hey, this helps us in our fire rating. This is something that we need to do. If it's not part of a business license requirement, then you're kind of trying to sweet talk your way in there. So, but you be reasonably, and I say reasonably, don't bend over backwards too bad, but reasonably try to obtain that owner's permission and the owner's um, take the time to speak to the owner, educate them a little bit, kind of helps you in that process to get their permission, and you can also win their confidence in what you're doing and why you're doing it, and it'll help out. Um, I know in our area, business owners talk to each other, and if you can get some on your side, it kind of helps to whenever you go to the next one. Yeah, I was talking to so and so and said that y'all were going around doing this. I think it's really great that y'all are doing that. At least y'all aren't sitting around um, wasting my tax dollars watching soap operas and eating ice cream at the fire station. Y'all are actually out doing something. So yeah, I've heard that too. So any which way. A person can answer questions and give access to locked areas. Um, and if you can include them with you, um, having a representative of the business along during the inspection, that helps. Now, again, that's where you're going back on the time. If you can pick a slower time on a certain business that gets pretty busy, you tend to have more support, and that'll help you as you go along. Um, if you're making it a little bit easier for them, they're going to make it a little bit easier for you, kind of thing. Um, so, like I said before, you're going to be judged at your first appearance. Wear your nice, neat, tidy uniform. Have your ID card visible. Yeah, according to policy, we never ran. I had an official card that I carried in my super duper fire inspector clipbook or clipboard like that, but I never put it on. But if somebody questioned my uh, identification or authority, I could show them that, and it's there if I needed it. At a job site, construction site, you may not want to go in your pretty whites, um, but your dress may change according to what you're doing and your purpose for your inspection. But have a professional attitude. That goes a long way, and it does nothing but helps. Um, Before meeting the building owner, there's a few things you can do from the outside. Your inspection starts before you even leave the office. But whenever you arrive, you look at your vehicle access, you look at your fire lanes, your hydrants, your fire department connections. Is there any type of issues on the exterior of the building? Do you have shrub bushes that are covering up the FDC connections? Is there any type of restrictions or anything that would prevent apparatus from getting there? So, I mean, be thinking as soon as you pull up. As you come in, have your, follow your predetermined and structured order on how you're going to conduct your inspection on the inside. If it's a really large area, break your inspection down into sections and areas. It kind of just helps be a lot more manageable. The locked door doesn't mean that the area is exempt. You need to inspect every square inch if you're there to inspect the building. And that may be something that they tell you, well, I don't have a key to it. My manager does, and he's not going to be back until such and such time. Then at that point, try to schedule something with that manager. Also, being really thorough helps to, if you get into that habit and you're always consistent and thorough, it just helps out. Whenever you notice a code violation, be specific about the problem and what steps that they need to take to fix it. But also be aware of any dangerous situation that may warrant a stop work or a closure of the business. All right, you're also check your fire protection features, fire alarms, your sprinkler systems. Make sure that they're regularly inspected and that they're good to go. Check your sprinkler heads, like a quick little look at your everything. Making sure that they're being cleaned properly, and you don't have paint on your frangible bulbs or fusible links in your sprinkler heads or on your sprinkler heads. That they're not just caked up with lint and so on and so forth. It says in here to check your hydrants on or close to the property. Um, if you have a regular hydrant maintenance program, I would go back and reference and look at your flow on those hydrants, but just make sure that they've been flowed and maintained in a reasonable amount of time. But you definitely do want to do your inspection on your a visual inspection. You don't want to start twisting, turning knobs and stuff like that, like on sprinkler systems and all. You may have a costly issue for the owner that may get put for the city or your jurisdiction to cover. Also, your kitchens may require a hood system and you make sure that it's cleaned and prepared. Ansel systems or the extinguishing systems are ready to go. So focus your inspections on that. Look for your different interior hazards, electrical, emergency exit lights. You're exiting, make sure that your exits are open and available. Fire extinguishers, fire alarms, and detection systems we already talked about. Anything in general that may poke out to you. Heating appliances, any type of openings. If it's an opening through maybe a protected or protected wall, firewall, or something like that, making sure that it's not something that somebody come in after the fact and modified. One of my biggest things where it falls into the general and the electrical is the proper usage of extension cords. I hate extension cords. They burn down houses every day and buildings because they're used improperly. And I've been in the kitchens where they have them strung out like spider webs everywhere, and you know that's something you can point out to them for them to repair or and to fix. Also, your high hazard contents. Making sure flammable liquids are kept in a flammable closet. just looking out for those different type of hazards. Your ordinary hazards, and that's anything that you have that's boxed up, or paper supply, wood supply, things of that nature. And that's, again, it's going to be according to your group type of the building. One of the things that I've had to enforce is there's different places that would just stack stuff all the way up to the ceiling with a sprinkler system, where you have to maintain your either your 24 inches or your 18 inches of space between your stacked items or your stored items in the ceiling. Your low hazard contents, we want to be aware of everything, and just some examples of things to keep an eye out for. All right, making sure also that your fire protection features that meet the hazards inside on your interior. And all sprinkler systems are not created equal, so making sure that it's robust enough to handle the hazard that it's protecting, and how the contents are configured inside of a building too. Like I talked about, is areas that like to store things all the way up to the ceiling. We want to check the building features, means of egress, making sure the doors swing correctly. I've seen it where a new construction, they'll have the door assembly in backwards, and they have to go and tear it out and put it back together the way it's supposed to be. And then also, checking that your travel distance are not exceeded for your maximum allowed distance, and that the doors open and close properly. The exit doors, and fire assemblies, if it's required, any smoke ventilation systems, ceiling tiles. If it calls for ceiling tiles in the building, make sure that they are all in place the way that they're supposed to be. Your exit lighting, your emergency lighting in hallways, and your egress paths, and your carpeting and interior finishing, making sure that it's proper for the building type. Your air conditioner, HVAC systems, that they're in accordance with codes. They should be regularly inspected. Your smoke and fire dampeners supposed to be in place, as well as if it's called for in that type of system. Your kitchen cooking equipment, you're going to deal with this, and it's going to be a pain. But contractor installs and tests the equipment, then you'll have third-party people that are going to come and clean and maintain it. You want to make sure that the hood systems are secured, that the proper gas and electrical lines are in place, and that the fans work as they're designed, and that the grease hoods and grease vents are being cleaned and maintained as they're supposed to be. Your laundry and garbage chutes, that's I think that's kind of a regional specific thing, but you may see them in some of the older buildings. But making sure that your sprinkler heads are, if it calls for it, that they're installed properly, and they don't have gunk hung up around them and all that. And then the door at the bottom of the chute, making sure that it's fire rated, nothing blocks the chute, and that they're separated by a room that is non-combustible. Your elevators and escalators, that they're inspected, and that the certificate for that elevator is current. I would also check the elevator key that is required to be kept on the property, and to make sure that it functions properly. And then your interior finish, making sure that your interior finishes meet the code requirements. It's combustible finishings. And then you have a pre-planned sketch, and you can prepare that before you even go out on the property. You can one of the things you can also look is use technology to your advantage. We have different map systems, satellite imagery that you can pull up, and it's easily accessible to everybody. And you may be able to use that to kind of get a layout if it's a big building or a complex or a development or something that you're looking at. And you can typically get a good overhead view of it. Some of your tax offices may actually keep a sketch on file that you can go and look at as well. Your new construction considerations, you may have different inspections that's along the way, especially if you work with your building official. So you'll see several kind of milestones that they have to hit along the way, and work with your building official or your building inspectors to notate any type of issues that you may encounter, that may be like a change order or something like that you're unaware of from the plan review stage to the final inspection stage. And then also if you have to inspect it at any point, maybe for making sure the rated firewall is put up in a certain area or rated assembly. Um, Also checking if there's any type of penetrations through a rated firewall or assembly, that it's managed in properly. But you want to make sure that the construction is correct and that it's as prescribed for fire protection features. And there's some areas and some aspects you may need to see the installation of the fire protection systems, like the hood system is an example where they may call you in to look at or to inspect it as the hood is connected in and as the vent systems put in, just so you can see it at its different layers and its different features. And then also the testing to prove that it's going to function as designed as well. Keep in mind any of your remodeling considerations, especially if you have older buildings. I mean, I know we all do in our jurisdiction. So it says here plans must be submitted and approved. That's hardly ever the case. You typically find out about remodeling after it's happened. If they're doing it properly, you may have to have a few different inspections throughout at various times. And also that's part of the processes we talked about in fire inspections is making sure that the safety processes and concerns are covered. You may have a post-inspection meeting with the owner, and this can be really simple. It doesn't need to be as elaborate as what the photo shows, but you can meet with them saying, hey, I found this, and that. This is where you're kind of working with people. Now you want to document it because you want to be able to remember what you told them, but this is where you kind of put on a smile and say, hey, here's what I found. It's not that big of a deal. We do have to have it fixed, but I'm going to give you a couple weeks to take care of it, or I'm going to give you 30 days to take care of it, and I'm going to come back and look at it. But I'm here to help you with it. I'm not going to shut you down over it, but this does need attention, and kind of helps to get their cooperation, and also thank the owner for their cooperation. Kind of the thing about it is, we all know in society, with things that are going on all over the nation, where law enforcement is kind of catching a bad rap in around a lot of areas. And this is very similar in that you're enforcing a code, you're enforcing a law within your jurisdiction that your authority is allowed you to do. So I would dare to say that having some good de-escalation skills helps to be able to deal with owners that may not be so happy with you you being there giving inspections, but if they're cooperating, you definitely thank them for it and thank them for helping you in doing that. We've covered documentation, and we've covered every bit of all this already. Consider the letter of the code and the intent of the code. This is the big thing. All right, the letter of the code is the black and white. What does it say specifically? The intent is, how is that going to fit into this specific situation? I'm a fire inspector 3. In 1 and 2, you learn a lot of good things. In 3, you learn how to apply it in the real world. Is the best way that I can kind of explain it to people, in that you justify your answers because you research the intent of the code. You kind of a little side note, what I recommend for everybody is NFPA and the International Code Council, International Fire Code books have a commentary book, and basically it breaks down and explains why a code is the way that it is. I recommend having access to that because you can sometimes read the commentary and it sheds more light on the intent of the code, especially if you find yourself having to do variances. It'll really, really help you out, really give you some insight into the code. And learning the difference between the two is really, really going to help. The letter of the code and the intent of the code, and how you apply it, and how you can still give a variance and still be successful in your efforts of providing a fire safe or a level of fire safety that is sufficient, and sometimes even more so than by kind of tweaking little things here and there, but you're still maintaining that reasonable level of safety. The violations, if you note it, then they need to be corrected as soon as possible, and not something to kind of lollygag around. But you do want to give them a reasonable amount of time. I mean, stuff doesn't happen overnight. You can't just snap your fingers and fix whatever. Excuse me. So, that's something, yes, violations need to be corrected. And according to the severity, you may shorten that amount of time. But keep that in mind too, that it needs to be reasonable. You may have some violations that you point out that they turn around and fix right then and there. You still need to document it. Still need to document that you pointed out that violation and document that it was corrected. So that if you come back in the next years and you see that it's the same thing, or next year's inspection, and you notice that it's the same thing, it makes you know that you need to probably go a little step further to make sure that they're maintaining that properly. Research your appropriate codes and standards if you need to. You may come into something where it's a head scratcher, it's a violation, but you want to make sure that you have all your bases covered. I carry a code book in my vehicle, my work vehicle. So if I'm at an inspection and there's something that I need to get a little bit further information on, I will go out and reference it, and I will research it real quick and make sure that I'm citing the proper code, that I have all the information to conduct that inspection and to notate the violations. And it says, for the reinspection dates, like we talked about before, follow your discretion and agency policy. You may have, your policy may state this is the only certain time frames you can allot for reinspections and corrections. So I mean, follow that if you have a policy, or you can use your discretion, just reasonable amount of time. If there's non-compliance, the municipality maybe need to be called in to take it a step further and to handle and to achieve compliance. And that's one of the things you must not know, or you must know the specific problem when you're investigating a complaint. And it says the owner should not know what you plan to inspect. Now, typically, when you're investigating a complaint, you're not saying, hey, can I come look at this? I had a complaint that you're blocking an exit. And of course, when you get there, all the exits are going to be open. And then as soon as you leave, they're going to block them back up with, whether they're stacking merchandise there or they're, whatever they're doing. So those are typically going to be your unannounced kind of surprise inspections. But whenever you get there and you meet with the owner, operator, supervisor, manager, whoever, you can say, hey, I had a complaint that this is being taken care of. Let's go look at that. In your complaint form, we've already kind of talked about that and everything that needs to be included into that. And we should always try to strive to improve the inspection process. If you conduct the inspection without knowing what to look for, it's a waste of time. And I agree. Read your books, get in your code books, attend classes, talk to contractors and manufacturers, and join your local fire inspectors association. But make your network, expand your network. I still have guys that I grew up in the fire service knowing that some are retired, that are they may not be code gurus, they may not be the world's best fire inspectors, but it's somebody that I know has a lot of experience and can lead me in the right direction. I can call and bounce things off of them and, hey, what do you think on this, or have you experienced that? And I also have people who may have the same or less experience that I still will call and bounce things off of, and they may have some other insight on it. So, network, definitely network. Combining the knowledge and experience will make you more confident and will definitely help you as a fire inspector. All right, fire inspection is reasonably, we're looking for making sure the building is safe for occupants. We talked about the different types of inspections and that are conducted, the how that we're going to prepare for fire inspections, and then the processes before the construction phase or the plans review phase, and then also the final inspections. That the codes that you can enforce within your jurisdiction. Know your forms and your what basic forms and documentation that you're using. You're not allowed to do so without permission of the owner, except in exigent circumstances. However, this is something I do want to point out, and I didn't think of it then, but I'm thinking of it now while we're doing that. Another option, if you have somebody that will not allow you onto the property, and this is like, say, if it's based off of a complaint, if you're following up on a complaint inspection, you may be able to get a search warrant. According to your jurisdictions, if they allow and how it operates, you may be able to, citing that you have a complaint, you may be able to convince a judge to order a search warrant that can be served on the property for the specific inspection. If you're able to do that, and you do that, you have to list everything that you plan on looking at, the circumstances behind it, and all. I've never had to obtain one for a fire inspection, but it is an option if there is a significant risk to life and safety. So anyway, another tool for the toolbox. And keep in mind that your process for inspecting the building is going to vary with the type of occupancy. You remember that you start the inspection at the office with reviewing your information. Whenever you arrive on scene, take a minute and inspect the exterior. You may, before you even make contact with anybody, just walk around the building, see what you see. You may see something from the outside. A lot of times people just like to run in and do an interior inspection where there's a significant violation on the outside. So you be mindful of that. And, on your inspections, follow a structured order. Don't just bounce all over the building, and look in every room. We talked about sketches, about post-inspection meetings. Let the owner know what you found, and if there's any violations, how that they can take care of it. Document the inspection, code violation, and like we've been talked about all night. And this is like what I said, the code violations are not always black and white in nature. There's the letter of the code and the intent of the code, and you should consider both. I like that. Whenever I took inspector, it was black and white. There's, this is the bare minimum of the code. This is the bare minimum requirements. And it's unreasonable to think that anybody can operate successfully with that kind of mindset. So, keep in mind of the letter of the code and the intent of the code. And, if your fire inspection comes from a complaint, have the necessary information regarding that very specific problem. All right, guys. Any questions? Is everybody still with me?
Oh yeah, we're here.
Okay, just making sure I wasn't putting everybody to sleep.
Oh no, just make sure you give us a PIN number for.
Hey, there you go. That's good for reminding me, because I would have slammed forgotten until after I done closed it out. All right, the PIN number for tonight. Everybody get their pen and pencil ready. It's going to be 1031-004. So
1031-004.
yeah, that should follow a pattern. Yeah. Any which way. So I think what we're going to do, since we've got a little bit of time worked into our schedule, we'll follow up with the fire extinguishers and the housekeeping. May try to work that into our plans for tomorrow. It's already kind of late for tonight for the class, but just remember, in what we talked about in doing the fire inspections, performing the inspections, is be professional. You got to think too. You're dealing with these people's livelihoods. If it's a mom and pop store, they've got their own blood, sweat, and tears in it, and be considerate of that. Now, it doesn't give an excuse for them to just get away with whatever, but be willing to work with them. But you can do that and still accomplish what you need to. But being professional, even if it does end up where you have to take action and it ends up in court, your professionalism is going to guide you through all that, and it's going to account for a lot whenever you're in your processes and in your documentation. It's going to show, and it's going to really help you out to get things done that you need to get done. So that's one of my biggest things is everybody being professional. And if you professionally conduct the inspection, you professionally document and maintain your records properly, it does nothing but make life a lot easier for you. So that's my soapbox about the evening. Do we have any questions on things that we covered, didn't cover? Anything from any other night, whether I covered it or Rob covered it or whatever?
Not yet.
Okay. And like I said, I have my email address. If you don't have it, let me know. And that's a means of communication. I'll shoot me an email if you have a question, and I will do my best to answer it. If you have a question that you want to discuss, write it down, put it with your books and stuff, and then next time or next class, just let me know, and we'll talk about it. We'll discuss it, and it may be something that everybody else needs to hear. It may also be something that good discussion and help to understand some of the different processes. Our next tomorrow night class, we're going to try to make up some of the chapters that we missed, and then we'll go over chapter 7. It's going to be occupancy, safety, and evacuation plans. That's going to be something that's an important part of our inspections. At this point, we've got the way the class is structured is, you know what you're doing, you know why you're there, you know what you're looking at, the type of buildings, and the type of occupancy, you know how to perform the inspection, and you know how to document it properly. Well, now we're going to start getting into the chapters that has a lot of meat and potatoes of very specific things that we're going to be looking at in our inspections, and we're going to be working, kind of going over some different skills that that we're going to have to know for this class, and that we're going to be able to kind of get a skills mastery going, because it's all kind of theory till we put pen to paper, and we really start working out some research, practicing research, and working on these calculating or grouping a building into what occupancy it is, working on your occupancy loads and stuff like that. The documentation stuff's easy. We've been writing reports for a while, and it's not really that much different. But anyway, so if we don't have anything further, any further discussion or any questions, we'll go ahead and call it for tonight. I appreciate everybody logging in tonight, and bearing with me in the technology issues. If again, if you have any questions, email me by all means, and we'll catch back up tomorrow at 6 o'clock. All right, so I guess that's going to be it. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I'm about to shut it down and put kids to bed. So yeah, have a good night.
Appreciate it, bro. You too.
Later, bro.